everybody. Welcome to Both Sides of the Story. I'm your host, Alan Janae from CBS 4. Thank you for joining us. Our special high school debate series continues tonight with our special third place match, challenging our students and our viewers to look at important Colorado issues from both sides. Students from 4 Colorado high schools have competed in our tournament series of debates, and we're down to our last 2 matches. 2 students compete tonight for third place in our first ever tournament. Now, each student will offer a case, ask and answer questions of their opponent, and offer rebuttal. We'll also feature an expert judging panel that will chime in with questions of their own. Both students have prepared a pro and con case for tonight's debate topic, and they won't know which side they'll defend until we have a coin flip right here in our studio. Now, tonight's program features students from the George Washington Speech and Debate team, as well as St. Mary's High School's Speech and Debate program. So let's meet our participants. First, Monroe Roush. She is a senior at George Washington High School, and this is her 3rd year on the team, focusing on extemporaneous speaking. When she isn't doing speech and debate, she runs cross country, and she also plays the flute. Next, we have Colton Barta. He is a senior at and a Lincoln Douglas debater at St. Mary's and is a national qualifier. When he's not doing speech and debate, he runs cross country and he plays guitar too. So we have a special panel of experts who will offer their analysis of our debate. They are Dominic Dezzutti, host of Colorado Decides, the election debate series produced in conjunction with CBS 4. Next to him is my colleague Sean Boyd, political specialist with CBS 4, and political analyst Eric Sonderman. Both Sean and Eric are also part of our Colorado Decides debate series. Now, before we get started, let's learn about the skills Monroe has developed on her team.
I think a lot of my leadership skills have really helped me in extemp. They've helped me become one of the captains, which has been really an amazing opportunity for me to really grow as a leader. Also, I'm able to really think on my feet, which for my event is especially important because we have 30 minutes to prep a 7-minute speech. And so I've been able to really kind of hone those skills of learning to think on my feet and know what to say immediately.
Now, Monroe is considering Santa Clara University among other colleges, and she's going to be studying government next year. Also, Colton now explains his love affair with speech and debate.
When I say forensics is the love of my life, I mean, like, it's been part of the best part of my high school experience. I love so much going into a round and not knowing how you did, and then going on to another round, you still don't know what you did, how you did, because they don't tell you till the end of the day, and then you're just sitting there and you have no idea, but you get called up. And that feeling, that's what it's all about. But it's also about the friends you make at forensics. It's a room full of smart people who want to talk about real things. I can't state in words how much that means to me.
And it does. Every room full of debate kids are awesome. Colton considering attending NYU or Yale. He's thinking about studying chemical engineering. All right, it is time to set the ground rules. Each side will present their case, ask each other questions, and have a chance to offer rebuttals. When it's finished, we'll go to our illustrious panel for their own questions, and they'll find out whom they feel offered the best arguments. So let's get started tonight. The issue for debate is whether Colorado should adopt an open presidential primary. So let's have our coin flip right now. I'm going to bring you on out here, and you go ahead and call it.
Heads.
And it is tails. Monroe, what do you have?
I'll take the negative side.
You'll take the negative. So that means, Colton, you're going positive today. So you will begin first during this round. The floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Democracy is defined as a system of government by the people, all the people. Because I believe that Colorado should honor the spirit of democracy as much as possible, I stand resolved. Colorado should adopt a presidential primary system, and it should be open to all registered voters. Let me begin by saying that Colorado Democrats and Republicans have agreed to push for changing the state system of choosing presidential candidates to a primary election instead of a caucus. The Coloradoan tells us that an agreement came after a raucous caucus last spring in which party faithfuls in both camps complained about the current system of thousands of precinct meetings to start the process of choosing endorsing presidential candidates. Democratic caucuses across the state were filled to capacity, with some leaving rather than waiting in long lines. The Republican caucus failed to even include a straw poll for the presidency. State GOP Chairman Steve House told the Associated Press that he and the head of the state Democratic Party have agreed to push for a presidential primary vote in 2020 to allow for more people to participate. House said, "We got to do something different to involve more people because it's our country we're talking about here." His Democratic counterpart, Rick Palacio, agreed, and so should we. Second off today, the caucus system silences independents. And because of independence, Coloradoans have always valued their freedom and independence. Those traits help to explain why independents now make up the largest block of voters in the state and why Colorado leads the nation in the growth of independent voters since 2008. But the use of the caucus system in effect silenced these possible voters. According to Kelly Bruff of the Denver Business Journal, by using the caucus system, we are in fact excluding more than 1 million voters from having a say in early elections. This effectively challenges not only the values of a Coloradoan, but the values of an American. And making sure that the whole population gets a say in their government is key to democracy and worth any challenge or price tag. Finally, the cost of inclusion is relatively small. Because all taxpayers pay for election, it's not fair to force voters who want to be independent to join a political party in the current caucus system. It's high time Colorado join over 30 states where primaries are open to unaffiliated voters for presidential nomination. This may also offset the trend of declining voter participation in primary elections. Roughly 1 in 5 Colorado voters in 2014 were involved in picking the candidates that were on the election ballot. 1 in 5. A mail ballot primary would also include military and other Coloradoans overseas instead of only those physically present at the caucus. And what is the cost for all this inclusion? Only about $2 per voter, a small price to pay for including everyone and expanding democracy. It's because I want to see democracy expanded instead of seeing it shrink that I stand in firm affirmation today that Colorado should adopt a presidential primary system, and it should be open to all registered voters.
Colton, thank you very much with the affirmative. Now, Monroe, you have 2 minutes for any questions and cross-examination. Go ahead.
Awesome. Colton, you talked about how we're decreasing democracy with a closed primary system, but isn't it still democratic if people are allowed to vote in the general election?
No. I believe that democracy is not only just about the general election, it's about all the things that lead up to it. I believe that people should have a voice as much as they can get into government, which includes these primaries and these caucuses. But as we have seen, these caucuses are not doing a very good job. In fact, they're shrinking democracy, and that's why we need to be on the affirmative of today's case.
Awesome. You also talked about how moderates and independents make up the biggest voting bloc. But given that voters are more polarized than ever, even if they consider themselves independent, how would having independents vote lead to better governing?
Well, you see, if independents were allowed to have a vote and a say in government, being that most people are in the middle despite polarizations that we're seeing on both left and right sides of government, an effective initiative to appeal to the independent voter would lead to more centralized, more agreement, and a really better democracy. But caucuses, again, are kind of nulling out this possibility and leaving the independent voter kind of, in a way, disenfranchised.
All right. You also talked about low voter turnout. So why would having an open primary increase voter turnout, given that voter turnout is really low even in states with open primaries?
Well, you see, when a person sees that they're denied on the basis of what they believe being an independent, and they're told you're not allowed to come because you're not a Republican, or you're not allowed to become because you're a Democrat, then that completely nulls out the possibility of them turning up to show support for a candidate they might like. But if we had the open primary, they would still have a voice. Now, they would have to choose between Democrat or Republican which one they would want to have a voice in, but the fact is they would still have a voice, and therefore they would turn out just to make themselves be heard instead of remaining silent.
All right, that's it for the questions right here. The issue up for debate today, again, is whether Colorado should adopt an open presidential primary. With a negative, Monroe, now the floor is yours for 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Presidential primaries in Colorado should not be open because it is the job of the parties to choose candidates, and that process should not be open to the public. First, when parties are in charge of choosing candidates, we end up with more qualified candidates. The Atlantic explains that beginning in the 1970s, politicians sorted themselves into parties. The parties have developed systems which encourage their politicians to work together, reward reliability, and encourage stability. For example, Donald Trump has won closed states about half as often as he won open states. Regardless of whether or not you agree with Trump's policy proposals, there's no question that he's inexperienced at politics, yet running for the highest office in the country. By having an open presidential primary, we would be taking that power out of the hands of the party and putting it into the hands of the people. In this way, politicians would no longer be held to a standard of a history of service, but instead would be judged based solely on the political climate at the time of the election. Politicians would therefore have no incentive to actually experience working in government. Not only would politicians in a closed primary system be more experienced, they would also have more experience working on a variety of topics. An open primary system would encourage candidates to campaign on just a few key issues which voters care deeply about, rather than gathering knowledge and experience on a vast number of issues, some of which the electorate might deem unimportant. In reality, however, it's necessary for candidates to be able to deal with a wide range of problems, even those which voters do not feel passionately about. Additionally, when the parties choose candidates, more moderate candidates end up on the general ballot. Proponents of an open primary system say that with the general electorate in mind, candidates are more moderate. However, voters actually often can't delineate between candidates within a party. In fact, research from UC Berkeley found that voters voted Tea Party candidates, Occupy candidates, and true moderates as equally centrist. Having an open primary would not encourage moderation. By contrast, party leaders tend to encourage candidates who appeal in a general election and who will sustain and build the party's brand. So they generally lean towards relative moderates. But more importantly, by allowing the parties to choose candidates, we encourage more efficient governing. Currently at the national level, we've seen unprecedented levels of gridlock, where traditional party members are too afraid to vote for compromise because they are afraid of getting primaried, which means they would be voted out in favor of a more extreme candidate who exploited their opponent's weakness of collaboration to the general public.
Monroe, thank you very much. Colton, now you have 2 minutes for questions. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. First off, you begin by saying that it's the job of parties to select the politicians who will lead America. Being that we live in what is a representative democracy, wouldn't you agree that it is the job of the people to elect our leaders?
Actually, in the United States, we have an indirect democracy, and this has been very efficient in the past. By having the parties choose candidates which the people can then vote for, we see that we have more qualified candidates and more moderate candidates, which the general population in general doesn't have the knowledge to choose.
Yeah, you talk about a lot in your speech about moderates. Do you think that the primary or even caucus, do you think that the caucus system has been effective in helping America choose leaders who are moderates?
I think that we've seen a lot of people who aren't moderates be able to rise to high levels in politics, but that has nothing to do with a closed primary system. Instead, we've seen that in open primary states, candidates have been more able to be extreme and therefore rise to office. The parties have a huge incentive to have moderate candidates, but because we've reformed the party process to such an extent, that is no longer really working for America. But having a closed primary would help to maintain some semblance of order.
Why would candidates have to appeal to the person who likes the moderates when in the current caucus system, it's only party members who are voting, people identify as Democrat or Republican who are obviously not moderates, because the moderates are in the middle?
Because Republicans or Democrats want to see their candidate get elected. So they want to have a moderate who will they want to have a more moderate candidate who will appeal to a wider population when it comes to the general election. So even though a candidate is just vying for Republican voters or Democrat voters in their primary, in general, party members want them to be moderate.
All right, Colton, you now have 2 minutes for a rebuttal.
Thank you. Going over my opponent's case, she talks a lot about the job of the party to choose the candidate. When I disagree, I believe it is the job of the people, and she's right. We live in an indirect democracy when it comes to choosing the president. But as to who runs for president, that should be up to us, and that's the purpose of primaries and caucuses. The problem with caucuses is that they're disenfranchising people in Colorado. Again, going back to Kelly Ruff's quote, more than 1 million people are effectively being silenced by this caucus system, and that's unacceptable. Even if we live in an indirect democracy, we do not have the right to leave these 1 million people out in the cold when it comes to their say in early elections. She really seems to be championing caucuses and how they choose better leaders, but if we go through even this election season, it seems to me that they have chosen the exact same leaders as primaries, or at least in some contention. She talks about how a politician needs to be somebody who's an experienced politician and not someone, say, like Donald Trump, who is inexperienced. But the problem with this is that it completely voids out the opinion of, again, the 1 million people, the independent, or really just the Republican who's tired of seeing experienced politicians who know their craft, who know their corruption in the White House and want to see something new for a change. And she talks about how leaders must be able to deal with lots of problems. Again, this doesn't have to directly be related to political experience. It can be, yes. But again, somebody with Donald Trump who has obviously lots of life experiences, he, again, can be able to deal with lots of problems, but he can also be, again, very inexperienced, but just as somebody who's experienced can be. And finally, she talks a lot about moderation. And again, in our current system, moderation is not being achieved. The way it is right now, we are taking people who are in direct center, people who do not feel they can identify as either Democrat or Republican. They find themselves in the middle of these two, but they are left out in the cold by this caucus system, and this is most of Colorado. Thank you.
Colton, thanks very much. Issue up for debate today is whether Colorado should adopt an open presidential primary. Colton has had the affirmative, Monroe the negative, and Monroe, you now have 3 minutes to respond and close.
Awesome. The closed primary system is still democratic. Our country is built on an indirect democracy. Colton talks a lot about how voters are being silenced, but that is simply not the case. People can still affiliate on the day of a primary, so they can still vote if they need be. He also talks about how independents are being silenced because they have to choose a party. But even in an open election, independents have to choose a party. They cannot vote for candidates on both sides, otherwise their vote is invalid. So we see that because independents can still affiliate if they want to, and because we still have a general election which reflects the will of the American people, we still have a democratic system under a closed primary. And additionally, we must stress that with a closed system, we get better candidates. Experienced politicians are good. We want politicians in office who know how to deal with crises, and we want politicians who know how to collaborate and work on a large variety of issues. Closed primaries lead to more experienced candidates simply because the party system rewards candidates who are doing well within the party and who have years of experience. In this election, we've seen this on the Democratic side. Hillary Clinton was able to do very well because she has such a large range of experience. And ultimately, that experience will serve her well in the White House, whether or not should she win. Whether or not you agree with Hillary's views, it's still good to see that she has a lot of experience working on a variety of issues. And it's really important that we stress that under a closed primary system, we get the best governing possible. We have seen unprecedented levels of gridlock, and it's important that we don't do anything to worsen that gridlock. Because closed primaries lead to a larger number of moderate candidates, we want to maintain the current system. Ultimately, this will lead to more collaboration in our state government, and ultimately this will lead to better laws for the Coloradan people. And for these reasons, it's clear that we must negate today's case.
All right, Monroe, thank you very much. Finally, Colton, your 1 minute close. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly defend what she said about, she said that people can still vote and they still have to choose a side. This is correct, but again, giving people the chance to, again, identify as themselves instead of forcing them to change to your side of the party, that's called fair. You shouldn't have to say, I'm a Republican to vote the Republican. You should have to say, I'm an American, I'm a registered voter, I deserve to vote. And of course, yes, you still have to choose a side, but what can you do about that? If a person needs to find who they believe on either side of the aisle is the best fitted candidate for that party to go all the way up to the top to be in the general election. And then going back to her case now, she talks about politicians and that we want a politician that knows what needs to be done. But again, if we look at just the current election. That's not what the American people want. And if we listen to what democracy has to say about what the American people want to change from what is the old standard bearer. So saying what the American people want is, again, not a statement for her to make, not a statement for me to make, but it's not really clear. She talks about how on the Democratic side with Hillary Clinton, she has experience and how this will lead to a lack of gridlock. This could not be further from the truth, being that gridlock will happen with any bipolarizing candidate like Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. And for these reasons, I must affirm today's resolution. Thank you.
Colton, Monroe, thank you very much for a terrific debate today. Want to go to our panel of experts today. We have political experts with us with their thoughts on what they saw. So Dominic, take it away.
Alan, thank you very much. Both Colton and Monroe, you offered a great debate. This is very entertaining to watch. Let's get some questions. First of all, for you, Colton. Sean, you want to start us off?
So, Colton, political parties are like private clubs. So if you want to participate in the club, why shouldn't you have to join it?
Because these political parties shouldn't be as they are right now. A private club that determines the outcome of our future election should not be a private club. It should be a public club that anybody's allowed to come in and give their opinion.
Eric?
Sure, also for Colton. Is there a potential, if you open up primaries, for political interest to sort of what I call game the system? For people who might really want the Republican candidate to win in November, so they want the Democrats to nominate the weakest possible candidate, so therefore they infiltrate a Democratic primary, or you can turn the situation in reverse. Is that a potential, and how would you combat it?
It is a potential, and I would combat it by making that kind of investing illegal. It gets in front of the way of democracy and in front of our political processing. So stuff like super PACs I don't think should be allowed. I think there should be a public finance system for these kind of things. But that's just one solution.
Thank you, Colton. Let's offer a couple questions from Monroe. Sean, start us off.
So, Monroe, if you let everyone participate, how would you argue that you don't have candidates that represent everyone rather than just the extremes of the parties?
Well, we've seen that candidates will often in a open primary system actually cater to the most extreme voters on both sides. And in this way, moderates still get left behind, but there's just a wider range of voters. Additionally, most people today would call themselves moderate, but their voters are still extremely polarized. So having an open primary wouldn't necessarily mean that we get more moderate candidates.
Eric?
Sure, for Monroe, a lot of your case is based on the fact that that we get moderate candidates even out of the current system. As an unaffiliated voter myself, the largest group of voters in Colorado, how do you square that with the recent experience where Bernie Sanders did very well, 60% almost in Colorado, a closed caucus state, or Darrell Glenn won the Republican primary in a semi-closed Republican primary as the most conservative Republican candidate? I'm asking how you square your contention with recent experience.
Well, I think that we've seen that this election has been an example of a lot of strange things happening in American politics. So I'm not sure if this election is always the best example, but we have seen in the past that independent voters have in some cases wanted more extreme candidates, but in general, that's not always the best thing for the American public.
I think calling this year's election a little bit strange than usual is apt description, Monroe. Al, you got to give us a couple seconds here so we can decide this was a well-argued debate. It's going to take us some time.
Might be underplaying that one, I guess. Dominic, thanks a lot. We're going to give our panel a moment right now to consider whom they felt won this debate. And that gives me a moment to let you know that immediately following this debate, we're going to have our championship round with Jack Owen from East High School facing off with Andrew Ying from Cherry Creek High School. So stick around. You won't want to miss that program. All right, panel, do you have a decision?
This was a tough one. I know I always say that to you guys. You've been here for a few debates now, but it really was. You guys offered a great debate. This is a real proposition on this year's ballot. I think both campaigns would be very lucky to have either one of you arguing for them. At the end of the day, it was a 51-49 kind of a choice over here, but Colton, we decided that your argumentation won the day. But again, a great debate, and what a wonderful way to start off our, really to end our tournament with the third place debate that was this well argued. Thank you both.
All right, congratulations, Colton. Barta, you have won third place now in our very first Both Sides of the Story tournament. You both, Colton and Monroe Roush, gave our viewers a wonderful debate tonight, and you ought to be really very proud of what you did and the intelligence that you did that with, and really showed people a lot. This is all we have time for our program tonight, and I want to thank our excellent students, all of those involved in accepting our challenge and participating in this debate and all of the debates. I also want to thank our esteemed panel for sharing their thoughts tonight, and finally, thank you for tuning in. It's the support of viewers like you and our sponsors who help make this show a reality. Now be sure and stay tuned for our championship match. That is coming up next. And you can always catch me, of course, every morning on CBS 4 for all of the latest news and information about this year's elections and its candidates and its issues. For everybody here at Colorado Public Television, I'm Alan Janay, and that is Both Sides of the Story.